Pregame.com.
Terrific bowl game, one that really is going to capture the imagination of fans of offensive football for sure. Probably going to be a little defense too. Oklahoma and Texas A&M. We're going to go to Chuck Edel for this one. Used to be in the same conference, Chuck. Probably still recruiting a lot of the same players. This is a big game,
sure,
recruiting-wise. You got Stoops, a little bit of the old guard. For Oklahoma, Sumlin, a coming coach right now. He's a hot coach.
He is a hot coach.
He's done a terrific job at Texas A&M. Chuck, tell us your thoughts. Well, by the way, Oklahoma's a 3.5-point favorite. The total 72.5.
Yeah, catch it 3.5, right?
A&M's a 3.5-point favorite. Sorry, I don't want to give
I thought you were using Cade's lines.
No, I don't want to. I was
his 6-5 book.
No, we know the SEC was favored in every single bowl game. A&M now in SEC.
Right. Obviously, I'm showing my hand because I'm on the dog there.
Exactly.
But you mentioned about they used to play in the same conference, and I think that's an edge as well. We saw A&M this year play a different conference. They play a different offense than the SEC's used to seeing. They spread it out. They play a little bit different style. Oklahoma's very used to that. I think they took some of these SEC teams by surprise.
They did.
Then let's look. The SEC down a little bit. 2-3 against the number so far here with a push there, and it could have been worse in these bowl games so far. I also think because A&M beat Alabama. When Alabama, the week after the tough game against LSU, who just by the way lost to Clemson, they caught them at a perfect time. I think that in the numbers somehow that game is still entering in the picture. I mean, I saw A&M struggle a little bit with Mississippi. They beat Mississippi. I mean, they lost to Florida, who's getting crushed right now as we speak. They lost to LSU, who we saw Clemson beat. So. This A&M team I think they're being put up on a little too high of a pedestal. Now here comes Oklahoma. I think it's just a great spot. Them as a dog, they're familiar with A&M. They've always been the better team in conference. I think they're still the better team here. I really do. I think we're getting some great value. VR says it. I put more than the salt shaker on the money line. I think you can put the salt and the pepper on this one.
Sprinkle in both hands.
Sprinkle in both. Throw some Parmesan cheese on it. I like money line here.
Wow.
VR, we're going to have to pull out the oregano, right?
Strong conviction.
Absolutely. There you go.
All over it.
VR, what do you think about this?
Listen, man, he made some great points. And I love the fact that not only did he kind of convince me a little bit, because I admit it, when I first saw this number, I liked Oklahoma right away because during the season, I had Oklahoma pretty high on my power ratings, even though they weren't highly ranked once they lost a game or two. With that said, I like that Chuck didn't throw in anything about the Heisman jinx.
Yeah, I'm not
because don't go there. Because here's why, man. It's just like the zigzag in NBA playoffs. Things like that. Once it gets factored into the number, there's no longer value.
Exactly.
On trends like that. So I don't believe that it has anything to do with it. With that said, having one of the hottest names in all of college football on your team is going to make you a little bit overvalued.
Absolutely.
Whether he won the Heisman or not, the fact that everybody was talking about Johnny Football is going to make A&M a little bit overvalued. So I think that you do have to factor in. My concern was how's Oklahoma going to handle Texas A&M's running game? And Chuck convinced me that they're going to have a lot easier time than the rest of the SEC did because of the fact Oklahoma's seen this offense. And that's a great point. Besides the fact we've come to the conclusion SEC may be a little overvalued this year based on how they're doing in the bowl games, the fact that the stats that Texas A&M's compiled has been against those SEC teams that haven't seen them. And there's some impressive stats. I mean, when you look at them, they run for 5.6 yards per attempt. That's good. Mm-hmm. That's above good. I mean, that's great. Yeah. That's gooder. Let's put it that way. But, again, it was against defenses that haven't seen it. And if you watch Texas A&M play this year, they didn't do as well in the second half as they did in the first half of games. Teams actually, when they went into the half, after they've seen that offense for 30 minutes, did a lot better in the second half. And I think having time to prepare and also having played this team for years, I think that gives Oklahoma a little bit of an advantage here. So he's convinced me. I'm going to do a little sprinkling of my own on
I haven't
Oklahoma
bet this
here.
game yet, but I do like that angle.
Boomers, Sooners.
I do want to ask you about Landry Jones, because we talked about Johnny Football, freshman, redshirt freshman. I didn't know anything about him going.
No, nobody
not a
did.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But Landry Jones, did he replace Jack Mildren? I think. I mean, hasn't he been there for like about 10 years?
Yeah,
or so?
and his stock is plummeting.
He'd have been a first-round draft pick.
Exactly.
About 2 years ago. I don't know what's going to happen now.
He finished off the season good. Yeah,
He did.
he came back. He did finish off the season good. Kevin Sumlin, you mentioned him. Well, he's an Art Briles guy. Let's not forget Oklahoma faced Baylor's offense this year already, held them 34 points and beat them up. They didn't beat them up. I think they beat them 42-34. But that's a similar style offense. Now a different type of team, but that Baylor team. This Oklahoma finished up the season on a good note.
Baylor put up great numbers this year, even without RG3.
Yeah.
They put up terrific numbers. So that offense didn't suffer that much.
No.
And Oklahoma held them to 34 points. So a little bit of familiar there with what Baylor runs. A&M a little bit different because they like to have the quarterback running. RG3 ran for Baylor, but Florence maybe didn't run as much for Baylor as this. But I think this Oklahoma, I think they finished off on a good note. You look at some
five straight games
scoring
here.
They beat that Oklahoma State. They won, against Oklahoma State, put up 51 points on them. Team we saw roll yesterday in the ball game. I think this Oklahoma team is the better team. We're catching 3.5 here, and I'll go that way.
Okay, very good. Well, we've talked about it. Let's go ahead and make it official.
Oklahoma, familiar with this Texas A&M team. A&M took the SEC a little bit by surprise. They played well. Let's not take anything away. But I think when everybody thinks of Texas A&M, they think of Texas A&M beating Alabama. Yeah. I think that's factored way too much in the number. I really do. I think we're getting a real good number here, plus 3.5 with Oklahoma.
I agree there. That the Alabama win.
Look at some of their other games. I mean, they beat up Mississippi State. Well, we saw Mississippi State lose to Northwestern. They lost the good teams. They lost LSU. They lost to Florida.
Got bottled up pretty much, too.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't score too many points. And the Alabama, they caught Alabama. It was a good game. I mean, that Alabama's never, I don't care how, but they caught them at, like you said, a perfect time after a real tough game.
Well, their starting quarterback cried for winning at LSU. I mean, the week prior. So it was a big game.
And then he went home to Miss Alabama. So
I saw that.
Don't feel too bad for him. Okay, coming up next, I'm going to go to a game and talk about one of the minor bowls, but still, listen, put up 11-10 and pick a winner. It's as major as you can get. Arkansas State and Kent State. So coming up, I'll be talking about that one. Just a reminder, you can see all our videos at pregame.tv.